Operation. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is Dean Woodbeck from Internet 2 and In Common, and this is a special edition of I Am Online this Monday. Thank you for joining us. And our moderator today, and the person who will kick us off, is Mike Zawacki from Internet 2. And part of his responsibility is the operating the Eduroam program in the US. So Mike, I'll leave it up to you.
All right, thank you, Dean. I Am Online is brought to you by InCommon, Internet 2, and the EDUCAUSE Higher Education Information Security Council. For those of you who have not yet attended one of these, we take questions and comments using the Zoom chat function. So please go ahead and send those messages during the presentation. You'll find the chat button along the bottom of the Zoom screen. You got to click the button to see the chat. And also the default is to send the message to the presenters. We ask that you go ahead and choose the drop-down menu and select the setting that'll send the message to everyone so that we can all sort of be part of the conversation. Thanks for making time for this. As I said, my name is Mike Zawacki. I'm with Internet 2 and the program manager for Eduroam. I'm going to start off here with a quick sort of overview of what Eduroam is, and then I will be turning it over to our three presenters. What is Eduroam? It is the boilerplate kind of description for it is federated authentication service for global wireless access for the research and education community. So basically, participating institutions provide access to their wireless networks to users from other Eduroam connected institutions. And those users are not authenticated by wherever they're visiting or wherever they happen to be, but rather the authentication happens at their home institution, which relieves a lot of the burden of the local network operators and makes for a more secure service. Excuse me. Here is a quick, relatively simplified sort of a diagram of how the service works. So we have Brian, an LSU student. He's visiting University of Tennessee and opens up his laptop. His laptop goes ahead and connects to the access point at UT. UT sees that his credentials aren't from Tennessee, they're from some other place. So it says, well, I don't know how to authenticate this person, so I'm going to go ahead and send it up to the cloud, to the Eduroam infrastructure, which then routes that request back to his home institution. Back at his home institution, the LSU confirms that Brian is a real person and does have credentials. And then routes the acknowledgement back to University of Tennessee, which then grants him access to their wireless network. It's worth noting that all of these, the communication between Brian and LSU all happen by an encrypted tunnel. That traffic is kept safe and no personal information is sent out in the clear. As we're sort of talking about the service and our presenters are discussing what they've been up to in the Eduroam space, there are a couple of key concepts to keep in mind. One of those is the service provider, the other is the identity provider. And you can think of the service provider as basically just a hotspot, a Wi-Fi hotspot that broadcasts the Eduroam SSID. And the identity provider is the home institution. They handle sort of the authentication and maintain the user credentials. So it's worth noting that Eduroam is not just Internet 2, it's not just in the US, it is in fact a globally available service with a global community that provides and governs that service. At the top sort of layer there is Giant, they're the global operator for Eduroam. And then kind of hanging off of them are other national roaming operators, other organizations that provide Eduroam in their country or their region. And in the US, that operator is InCommon, which is an LLC under Internet 2. And hanging off of us is Eduroam, which is, you'll meet them in a couple of more slides. They manage some of the technical operations for the service here in the US. So as I mentioned, Jan is the NREN of Europe. It's similar to Internet 2. They serve a membership of universities and labs and research organizations and cultural institutions. I guess probably one of the big differences is that Internet 2 is connected to regionals, and Giant kind of similarly supports other EU NRENs. And they are more sort of global in their mission and are funded through member dues and allocations of the EU Commission. So those other roaming operators I mentioned, the other Internet 2s of the world, Canary, SurfNet, and so forth. Canary is our kind of our analog up in Canada. SurfNet is in the Netherlands. They offer the Eduroam service in their respective countries. And all of us work with the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, the GEGC, on matters of policy and governance for the service. Internet 2 has a seat on the GEGC, and we basically represent the United States and advocate, you know, on the policy and technical front. So here's an example of some of the other countries that are involved in the GEGC. And they also include a couple of non-voting technical experts, one of whom, Philippe Ansett, is the head of Eduroam. All right, Internet 2, as I mentioned, is InCommon, as I mentioned, is operated by Internet 2. We're the RO in the US. We handle sort of the business functions, the marketing and communications, contracting, invoicing, and other business support. We provide some first level support for the connectors and subscribers and escalate to our technical operations team at Eduroam as needed. As I said, we have a seat on the GEGC and participate in some of the discussions and you know, governance votes that happen on that body. We also provide training and education on Eduroam in the US, and we engage stakeholders, all of you, in the service delivery of Eduroam. Eduroam is again, a contractor of InCommon. They handle the technical operations and created and operate, for example, the administrative interface and the reporting function that some of you are familiar with. And they provide second level technical support to the subscribers of our service, or the subscriber of the Eduroam service. And this is just a quick graph showing sort of the growth of Eduroam over the last several years. It was first turned up in 2009 with a whopping 2 connectors, 2 subscribers, and then you can see in 2020 we're over 710 now, and this sort of these 700 plus subscribers kind of cumulatively represent several 100,000 individual users. So I'll pause here. I haven't been watching the chat. Dean, are you able to see if anybody's submitted a question? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Go ahead.
I was going to answer for Dean, Mike. There's no questions yet.
Yeah, I just got it.
Yeah, sorry, couldn't find the mute button.
No worries. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter, Sarah Hasnain, the Associate CIO and Senior Director of IT for University of Florida, who is going to talk about what UF has been doing in and around the city of Gainesville.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah, and as Mike said, we have been doing some stuff with Eduroam. University of Florida, primarily like any other university, had its own several SSIDs, etc., up until last year. And then we decided that we would simplify our lives and we would just have Eduroam as our only SSID available for people to connect. In addition to, of course, like every other university, there is the whole concept of providing guest access, which is a little different than Eduroam. So Mike, thank you. So I will quickly go through, our lives prior to COVID-19, then what happened during COVID-19 and how Eduroam plays a part in that, and then what our strategy is moving forward as we return back to campus from COVID-19. As part of our story, I will talk a little bit about our airport, where we do have an Eduroam presence, as well as our dabbling into getting Eduroam on our regional transport system buses that service the campus. So the connectivity landscape, like any other university, as you would notice from this graph, somewhere a decade ago, there were not a lot of access points around. Wireless was not as ubiquitous and required as before, as we see now. So we started like a very small shop, less than 500 access points. But in 2020, as of right now, we are almost up to 14,000 to 15,000 access point. We are a 2,000 acre campus, and based on the acreage, it is still not enough, but we have grown, and I'm sure this resonates with many of you. The trajectory has been high. The demand for wireless access has been quite steep in the recent years, with students and faculty coming in with more than one device. Next slide, please. At any given point in time in the University of Florida, you can see about 80 to 120,000 active unique users on our wireless network. That's just a normal day in the life of this university. And this is all pre-COVID, as the next slides would indicate. So in the normal day with all of those users, as you can see, the red spots indicate the city of Gainesville, the location. The big blob is the university campus in Gainesville City. The smaller blobs are the adjacent locations. The furthest one up north is the Gainesville Regional Airport, and the red dot indicate activities on the Eduroam wireless of users connecting per access point. So the red indicates the number of users that are connected at any given point in time. Mike, if you could go to the next one. This is the heat map as when we are on campus. So this is normal life. I took a snapshot from last year because I had an easy access to that one. So this is normal. The campus is, active, and there's a lot of activity going on. And as we move around, as we move to the next slide, COVID happened, and the hustle and bustle on the campus, and as you can see, the activity on the campus kind of declined. So wireless connectivity dropped significantly sometime in the middle of March, when we were all asked to leave campus and do social distancing and alternate work locations, etc. And the students are back. So life on the wireless side has kind of declined on campus right now. But that does not mean that connectivity to campus is not needed. Next slide, please. The students obviously have gone from on-campus to off-campus locations and still need to be connected. And so one of the questions that came up was, well, where are all those UF locations where Eduroam is available, and can we redirect the students who do not have access to good quality bandwidth connectivity from their distant locations? Can we bring them closer to places where UF has connectivity available? And so the question of Eduroam and UF's present in the state of Florida came up. And as you can see from this map, we have almost 70 plus locations where UF's presence is, and where UF's presence is, so is Eduroam, and so is the UF guest SSID available in all of those locations. And it is interesting that we are not only present in the state of Florida, but we also sort of present on the next slide our very distant location of UF's Eduroam presence in Washington, DC. So that was very relevant for our Florida story, because we were looking at areas where Florida, and the rural areas where broadband is not as easily available. Can we bring the student population closer to these locations? So if you go to the next slide, Mark. Yes. So what we did was we said, okay, we know where our Eduroam presence is, and those are represented by the orange and blue dots that you see on the map. Let us see where the students are that are coming to us in this class or in this summer session, that may need to find some connectivity closer to where they are. So we overlaid the student map on top of our Eduroam presence. And if you can see on the slide, I show that in the Live Oak, the 32060 zip code, we can see that we have approximately 58 students that are in the vicinity of this particular UF research center that could potentially drive up to the parking lot or be in the presence of this area and sort of leverage the connectivity that bleeds out, or we could put out further or enhance in that area. So likewise, we overlaid all of the red is where our students are, and we kind of overlaid it on the locations of where Eduroam was present on our sites, so that we could send some targeted communications to students saying, hey, oh, by the way, here are the locations where you could potentially get access to some networking if you so needed. So that's kind of the conversation that started to happen on campus as soon as we went, okay, well, how do we get network connectivity closer to the students? Next slide, please. So as we come out of the first phase was, okay, how do you get people away and how do you get them to connect from afar? The next phase now that we are going through is how do you bring people back to campus, and then how do you manage the social distancing aspects of it? So one of the things that we are actively working on and had been working on prior to COVID-19 also, but now on an accelerated manner, is that we want to expand all our wireless capabilities to the green spaces that we have on campus. If you see at the north side of this diagram, the Plaza of the Americas is an outside space which we already have all sorts of wireless connectivity available over there. And our goal is that very quickly, before the students come back, have more of this spread out on all the green spaces, as well as alongside the university. So as I mentioned, the university is a 2,000-acre campus, and University Avenue, like many cities, passes by the university. And so we intersected University and 13th. And then on 2nd Avenue, which you will see here in the T-shaped format, is a part where a lot of our student body travels back and forth through. So our goal is to expand our wireless propagation, bringing Eduroam across the road so that students that reside on that side or in the businesses that they sit and do some work from, adhering to the guidelines of social distancing, we can get them on the secure Eduroam network rather than having them use open Wi-Fi connectivity that may be spotty at times. So right now, our goal is to do more outdoor expansion while keeping up with the indoor refreshes, but more focused on the outdoor side. We recently just did, there is a massive testing operation. In order to bring people back, there is a major testing operation happening where people will go through the corona testing. And so we had to do the whole location, which is an outdoor location. People will drive up to it and stuff. So it was one of the locations that was on our list. It just got expedited and got done in 2 days with fiber pulled and everything. But now we have a permanent external locations at our Phillips Performing Arts Center, where outdoor wireless and Eduroam has been made available. Next slide. Eduroam at the Gainesville Regional Airport, it's a very simple setup. We've had it for I think 2 or 3 years now. I have beefed it up a little bit now. It's a simple setup. We just have a couple of access points and a switch. Obviously the faculty notice it, and we've had calls to our CIO when it used to be spotty. It's not spotty anymore. We have formalized the relationship with the formal MOU and a service level agreement with the airport people, and have also negotiated a little bit of a bandwidth increase with the provider that supports the airport, and it works flawlessly. Gainesville, if you haven't been to Gainesville, is a very small city and the airport is extremely small, but it has enough flights that people go in and out of. And as you will see, I think on the next slide, it's not a lot of traffic. It ranges between 20 to 40 or 50 people at any given point in time. And but it's noticed. So since it's noticed, we make sure that it stays up and works. And like everything else, as you can see from the chart, traffic and activity has dropped significantly post March 18, and hardly any activity happening at the Gainesville airport right now. Next slide, please.
Sarah, if I
So-
could interrupt for a minute with a question, since it relates to the airport. How do the arrangements for the POPs, like at the airport and others, come about, and how is it funded? Is there state, federal funding involved?
So we got into conversations with the people that manage the airport and requested to have access to their telecom room. If they would allow us to put our equipment, we would fund the equipment as long as they kept up the bandwidth connectivity to it. So it was kind of a sort of a mutual agreement that they would provide the necessary bandwidth and let us hang a switch and a couple of access points. And it was a simple conversation, not a lot of politics involved. It was very informal until I arrived. And as a result of it being very informal, it was a little, sometimes, we didn't get notified when things would get down and so on and stuff. We would get notified when a faculty would inform us that it's not working. So since then, we have formalized this arrangement with a little bit of a Memorandum of Understanding document, which basically states that they will provide us access to the room to get, to troubleshoot our stuff and also provide us with the necessary connectivity. Since then, based on our relationship with Cox and stuff, we have been able to sort of encourage that bandwidth to be increased without any additional costs to anybody. And so it has worked out. It has not been a complicated case. I guess it has been a very simple relationship. So there is nothing fancy to share in that regard.
Yeah, so I want to kind of move things along. I know we have a couple of other panelists to hear from. This is a really great conversation, though. So I'd invite folks to stick around afterward, and we can kind of expand on this. There've been some other questions for Sarah around this.
So on the buses side, we did a proof of concept a while back, and as a result of the proof of concept, we tried out a variety of technology, Cisco, Pepper, Cradlepoint, and then at the end of the proof of concept, if you can move to the next slide, we came to the conclusion that we came up with a cost model. We have 132 buses servicing us. And then at the end of that, we presented the cost model. It was a partnership with the city of Gainesville and us. They provide the busing service to the campus. And once the cost was looked at, everybody asked the question, what will the students use it for? And it's a very short journey. And is it really, what's the biggest bang for this kind of money? And it didn't kind of go anywhere. And then all of a sudden, the question, what will the students use it for, got answered because COVID arrived. And if you could go to the next slide, please. During COVID, everybody said, oh my God, I wish we had the Wi-Fi on the buses because we could bring those buses to the areas where people do not have good enough connectivity. Alachua County, which is the county that we live in, did a similar thing with the school buses, and they drove them to those areas where students did not have great connectivity. So this whole idea about getting the buses connected became even more sort of heightened. And as a result, we are again beginning a new POC with if you could go to the next slide, please, with the clever devices, which have been selected by the city for upgrading their own fleet management system. And so we are in the process of now beginning this proof of concept, and the Eduroam document just got signed last week. And this will be something that we will be pursuing and hopefully getting done if all the stars align by the end of this year. So this is basically what UF is doing in terms of Eduroam. And I will now hand over the baton to Sharon from University of Delaware.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm CAO of the University of Delaware. If we could go to the next slide. So as Sarah had indicated, there's sort of a pre-COVID utilization of Eduroam, and we had recommended that this is the Wi-Fi solution for all of our staff and all of our students at the University of Delaware. we have a fairly robust utilization of that network by Eduroam members, and our own campus community utilized these services when we went to other campuses as well. But as you know, we're not exactly in a normal utilization time. So what this does in terms of utilizing hotspots allows our most at-risk students to be able to access Wi-Fi services across the state of Delaware. I would say that one of the most eye-opening aspects of COVID was to understand how many of our students really had challenges accessing internet services, broadband services in any kind of way. And for us, that was very much associated with rural areas, but it's not just rural areas. There are some city locations in some of the nation's most affluent cities where broadband providers don't go into that area because they can't get enough paying customers in a particular area of a city in order to provide access. So what we were trying to do was ensure that there was a safe location, safe in terms of personal safety, safety in terms of health safety, that were drive-up locations for our at-risk students to utilize. Not to mention that some of our faculty were taking advantage of this capability as well. So we tried to provide a map of services. And while Eduroam provides a national map of sort of all the member locations of where Eduroam services may be, trying to negotiate the entirety of the University of Delaware campus to understand where you might get access to these services is not something that map generally provides. So we were looking at providing an exact location, the restrictions of utilization, in some cases a photo of where that location might be, along with the shelf life of what this might be. So we may have turned up the service in a particular location, and once we finally get past COVID-19, the sooner the better. Come on, researchers and vaccines. This can have a shelf life and it could go away as well. So I've just put a link in the presentation. You can actually go and look at this yourself. So these hotspots allow basically any broadband connection or enterprise access point to become an Eduroam service area. And we first started working with Delaware school districts to brainstorm on how it is that we could provide this secure wireless access to University of Delaware students. So those technicians in those school areas would point their existing wireless access points, if it was close to a parking lot, to make sure that they could get a certain level of coverage in their high school parking lots, their middle school parking lots, their elementary school parking lots, whatever that happened to be. It's interesting because we have a lot of students from Delaware who attend the University of Delaware, and all of these schools viewed these students as their students. Even if they're University of Delaware students now, they really wanted to help out their community and the students in their areas who were attending our institution. So once we started putting information about this with the school districts, we had public libraries and other areas reach out to us to figure out how it is that they could provision this service as well. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is just a map, and actually this has already expanded since the last time I put this together. We have kind of a negotiation with the school district superintendents. Some of them didn't want to join Eduroam, so there's some communication that we'll continue to do there. So they've created some public Wi-Fi spots. But anything that's green on this map is a drive-up location where any of our students would be able to access Eduroam capabilities. So next slide. When you join this, you sort of get this immediate notification that there may be limited hours. You know, this is best effort. The buildings aren't open. You shouldn't expect to use the restroom, that sort of thing. And we expect you to follow social distancing guidelines associated with the state of Delaware at this moment. So we provide, as I indicated, additional information. It's kind of hard to see this because the links to which you'd find the exact Google Map location is a little bit difficult to see in the slide. But if you actually go to the map that we have, you'd be able to click around on this as much as you would desire. This is a location that happens to be one of the public libraries in Newcastle County. Delaware is actually comprised of only 3 counties, so you get to go to Newcastle, you get to go to Kent, or you get to go to Sussex. So the rules for Eduroam utilization beyond our campus sites where we were able to provide some access is that it is for academic purposes only. That keeps us in line with what it is that the governor of the state of Delaware says is an essential activity within the state. We ask people to stay in their vehicles within the designated areas that are located for this Wi-Fi access. And we have allowed everyone to reserve the right to ask people to leave. It's interesting because the governor's office actually knew that we were doing this. And you'll see state police officers or local police officers actually patrolling these areas to ensure that people who are utilizing these sites are safe during this time. And we're not implying any sort of technical support associated with the service. We're, as much as possible, just trying to provision as much access as we can to secure Wi-Fi services for academic use as possible. So as you know, as Eduroam members, we allow all institutions who are Eduroam members to access this service. But the new process with the map that we provided really allows us to ensure that whoever is utilizing this service is using it in the safest way possible. So we're providing specific locations on the University of Delaware campus to drive up. On our Newark campus, we have other locations in Georgetown and in other counties where we say specifically where someone should be able to go for that drive-up access. And the same is true for the school locations as well as for the public library locations. And while we sought to serve the students of the University of Delaware, it turns out, in fact, that those state of Delaware students, wherever they're attending, are taking advantage of this service as well. So you see folks like Boston University, Franklin and Marshall, Haverford, Tulane, University of Florida, Syra, William and Mary and others are utilizing this service. So next slide. So in terms of setting it up, we would work with a partner location. There are certain minimum capabilities that are required, like enterprise grade access points, minimum upload and download speeds, the ability to point the signals at a drive-up location. We work collaboratively with the partner sites to implement firewall rules and encryption keys. And then, of course, we configure the Eduroam Net portal to address and add the partner access points. So what else is important? So I say have a Mark Cabry, so I'm giving a shout out to my director of networking at the University of Delaware, who happened to come from the state of Delaware. So he had some relationships with people in the school districts where he could begin this conversation and begin to help create an understanding of why this might be important for our Eduroam members to be able to access. This started out with some comfortable video conference Zoom conversations to get the setup going. And then authorization became possibly the most complex aspect of this, making sure that we were following the rules of the state of Delaware and the governor's office. In the state of Delaware, there's not one sort of Department of Education entity. We had to work with each school district to ensure that they were willing to provide this. And even if they were technically capable of doing it, we needed the okay from the district school superintendent in order to deploy the Eduroam capability. And of course, county supervisors and others were engaged in how it is that we made this available from the public library locations and their approvals as well. So there was a lot of trust that needed to be built in order for us to do this, but I'll say it's very clear that the students are taking advantage of this. So you'll see this is a picture of one of the actual students who's driven up to the location. And just so you know that we were appropriately socially distanced, this picture was taken by the student's father who stepped out of the car to take a picture of her utilizing that service. So we think this is something that's very exciting, not only in Delaware, but we're working with Rochester Institute of Technology and EDUCAUSE and Internet2 to determine how it is that we might be able to crowdsource a map like this that's used nationally. But more to come on that, and perhaps that might be its own additional webinar later. And I'm going to turn things over to Jeff at this point for his exciting story about how it is that we're using Eduroam at this time.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm Jeff Begley. I'm an associate director with Utah Education and Telehealth Technical Services. UETN provides broadband access, Internet 2 access, serving all of higher ed, all of K-12, most libraries. And then we also serve telehealth connecting clinics, hospitals, public health locations around the state of Utah. And so we've had similar discussions we're having today within Utah, trying to figure out the best solutions to extend access to higher ed and K-12 to administrators, teachers, and students around the state. And so within Utah, Eduroam was well underway within higher ed. We had a couple of locations that were languishing, and since us a couple of years ago, they're all connected and participating with Eduroam. But within Utah, we've been having an ongoing discussion prior to COVID on how to increase access around the state and how to further leverage the network and the services that we provide. And Eduroam quickly rose to the top as one of those solutions that we really wanted to leverage further. And so a few years ago, we engaged Internet2 directly to partner on a project here in Utah to discuss rolling out Eduroam within K-12. And so we've progressed well at this. By July of this year, we'll have 39 of 41 districts all connected with and set up with Eduroam. We're working on charter schools. We have over 130 charter schools around the state, and we're looking at great candidates focusing first with libraries that can be SPs, but we've also looked at areas such as mass transit, which we will talk to as well. But as we talk about this extending access, Corey Stokes, who's listening in on this call today, pulled together a meeting a couple of weeks ago with all our stakeholders just to understand what is everybody doing out there to extend access during COVID-19. And so some of the things I'll discuss today are also to the credit of our stakeholders and their ingenuity and what they've been able to put together. And so the first one will go to, thanks Mike, we'll go to the Granite School District. So Granite was on our call, and like a number of districts around the state prior to COVID-19 and then kind of ramping it up during COVID-19, they looked at a solution to leverage MiFi buses. But in this case, the MiFi buses are strategically placed around the district. And so what Granite did, using a heat map and I believe free and reduced lunch figures, they were able to look at the entire district and determine locations to place those buses with the MiFi and around their district, and then they're able to monitor utilization to determine if they need to relocate a bus if they see one's really not getting hit, not getting utilized, make sure it's getting fully leveraged within that. And as they rolled that out, it's a 4G solution on those buses with local Wi-Fi. They were able to then extend Eduroam, which is great. So now we have a solution that is not only benefiting K-12, but all the Eduroam users. We have, as within any state, we have all these higher ed students that have returned home. And if access is an issue, now they are benefiting from this, this access as well. And we're seeing this to be a very successful project. We have some similar efforts around the state where other districts have leveraged Wi-Fi on buses, placing them in the community as well, or finding other ways to extend outside access. Mike, if you want to move on. One of the places that we had prior to COVID that's providing us a benefit now, you're able to hear Sarah talk about the Gainesville Airport and what they're trying to do there within Florida with mass transit. We have a great working relationship with the Utah Transit Authority, and we've been able to roll out Eduroam on the front runner rail system that runs north and south along the Wasatch Front from Ogden, Utah through Salt Lake down to Provo, Utah. We had this up and going prior to COVID. We have a lot of the population that's dependent on mass transit, including the front runner. Mike was here visiting as part of a conference we had just right before the lockdown, and that image on the right is actually Mike's while he was riding front runner to Provo and was able to take advantage of Eduroam. I saw a question earlier, how do these relationships get set up? We have a good working relationship with the Transit Authority, as does higher ed, and we find ways to benefit one another, whether it's data center space, help with infrastructure, and in this case, UTA willing to work with UETN on extending access to Eduroam on their rail system. And so that's the primary place they have it. It's been very effective for that purpose. We still, wrestling with other ways to extend that access. On the education side, we're actually seeing libraries here provide more of that outside, facing those APs to the outside, drawing in that community to the parking lot more than we are the schools. But there are districts that are looking at innovative ways that the students can pull into a parking lot and get access if they don't have another means. But that's case by case around the state. This extending access in Utah discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago that Corey Stokes put together, we learned during that one of the benefits that is being realized by K-12 but also higher ed students is down on the Utah portion of the Navajo Nation. And so both Utah State University has a presence in 2 locations down in Montezuma Creek and also in Monument Valley. And then the San Juan School District also has Eduroam available. And this is an area where I saw the question, who is willing to drive up and pull up to a school or location and for Wi-Fi access. This is the place. Broadband access is extremely limited within the nation, and so students will seek it out. And so these are locations that you will see people pulling up and looking to get network access, and by having Eduroam both in K-12 in San Juan County, in the northern part of the Navajo Nation, as well as with Utah State University, we've increased that access for both the K-12 and the higher ed students, and that's been communicated back to us from students down on the nation that have found a benefit to that. And so this is one place where, having that access, they will go seek it out, and they do. And we're seeing that benefit. But we're also anxious to listen to today's discussion to learn other ways that you may be rolling this out and providing access that we can leverage and take advantage and share with our stakeholders as well. So really appreciate the time and any questions that you have regarding what we're doing here in Utah. We love to share. One thing I will make note of is part of the project with Internet 2, we have been documenting our processes, We've been posting that on UETN's website. You can grab that information. It's yours to look at and peruse and take advantage of, but we're trying to make sure we're providing as much detail back to the community as possible. And it's been a terrific partnership with Internet 2, and we appreciate that as we've been able to work on this together here in Utah, and we're seeing the benefits of it now. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to all of our panelists. Let's see. We have a quick question from Keith about how if a non-Internet 2 university wants to join Eduroam, how does the process start? It's pretty easy. Just go to incommon.com/Eduroam, and there you'll find links to the service and how to join. You know, sort of a review copy of the connector agreement and so forth. And you're always welcome to reach out to me personally if you have questions that you're not finding answers to. Time to kind of wrap up a couple of other questions that came out. Let's see here. There was one question earlier, I think during Sharon's presentation about getting rights to pole top real estate. Let's see.
And I'll say that
Yeah.
we can have to deal with that for University of Delaware. Any poll locations that we used were actually on the properties, and that tended to be in library locations. Most people were actually taking wireless access points that were inside buildings and pointing them at parking lots.
Sarah, can you, and Jeff, do you guys have additional stuff to add there?
Yes, I've indicated in the chat, in the city of Gainesville, there is an ordinance. You can't really mount anything on the poles. And we had that conversation as we wanted to expand Eduroam down 2nd Avenue. And it got complicated. So we decided to propagate off of the buildings across on the sites where we had some access to those. And that's kind of how we overcame that challenge. The city was very clear to us on that, you know, it's not just about us, right? It's about once they do it. Plus those poles have some architectural value, and you can't really just start plunketing stuff on it. So they have to be camouflaged in a particular manner. So those were all the issues that we dealt with at that time.
Jeff, do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
I was going to say here in Utah, that component is tied to our stakeholder. And so as we partner with them, then they are traditionally ones that'll navigate where those APs are placed.
And then we had one that I'm going to lob specifically to Jeff from Paul Ross. He says that some K-12s are hesitant with connecting to a university network because of filtering concerns. What have your partners done to address this?
Great question. So that obviously one of the first things that we had to hit head on here in Utah. So as we've rolled out Eduroam within K-12, the first people that were able to take full advantage of it were administrators, teachers, as well as those students. You know, we heard Sharon talk about student access. So we'll have student teachers within the districts and that showing up. They're the first ones to get access. But then as we look at the students, we have a few districts that are looking at rolling it out to students first. Some actually have, and what they're doing it is on student devices only right now. And so as they do that, they already have a responsibility to ensure those devices are filtered, whether it's Eduroam, another network, wherever they're connecting, those devices have to be filtered. And so the district takes that component on, and they're very cautious to make sure that they have the right components in place to do that. We're a big Chromebook state, and so we just published a statewide technology inventory. We have somewhere, Corey will know, but somewhere in the area about 450,000 Chromebooks around the state. And so a lot of the focus has been on those devices. iBoss is one of the main solutions that's used in education here. But it's on the district to make sure those devices are prepared and set up appropriately before they connect to Eduroam or any other outside network.
Okay. Anyone else want to? I think Jeff is kind of our panelists has been the only one who's really had to tackle that question, unless someone else wants to jump in and talk about it as well. And there was another question that that came up. I think it looked like some folks had started to answer this in the chat. With schools that have gone Eduroam only, how do you accommodate clients that only support pre-shared key, PSK? Gaming consoles, embedded systems, etc. I don't know, I guess, Syra, do you want to tackle that one first?
Yes. So we have done something with that. And that's a special setup for gaming devices and those kinds of devices that require some sharing of keys, etc. So we have so our network is segmented for a wide variety of things, just like anything else. So there is the wireless component, of course, and then on that also we have some segmentation pertaining to the types of devices that need to connect and what policies or what things need to happen for that. So the devices don't connect to Eduroam, they connect to what is intended to be the perfect setting for those kinds of devices. And we have actually rolled that out in some part of our, these fraternity and sorority homes where it is required. Housing has a very stricter policy in terms of what is looked at in terms of traffic and so on and so forth. But over there also we have deployed it in layers in a manner that the devices do get to do what they need to do. But they don't sit directly on Eduroam in that regard.
So I put a link in the chat of our policy on our service management page regarding connecting to the UD network, whatever kind of device that you're trying to connect. So folks can just go to that spot and look for that URL.
Okay. Jeff, anything to add there?
No, I don't.
Okay. Great. Okay. I think we have, what do you think, Dean? We have time for one or two more questions?
We do, yes.
Great. There was a question earlier from Gerard, and I don't know that I saw this explicitly addressed. Have people experienced demand from their UISO to have home institution devices scanned, like as with a traditional NAC, for firewall activation and currently activated AV on the device under Eduroam? Syra, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. I responded that, we don't manage personally owned devices. It's a very clear, personally owned devices are outside the purview. So we don't scan them and do anything with them. Anything which is a university owned device, whether you're taking it home to work from, etc., that has all the managed policies and it goes through the whole scanning, etc., etc., so on and so forth. It is our intent that, and we haven't gotten there as yet, but it is our intent that for any BYOD, when you land on our network, that you are separated into a different zone. Right now, that's not the case. You are on UF guest, unless you are an authenticated user bringing your own device, you land on the same kind of zone. But our goal is that we intend to, it's a BYOD, we intend to place you in a different zone and have different sort of security postures around that, but we have not reached that level as yet.
Okay. Okay, and then I think C Nash posted a question. What type of of NAC Wi-Fi onboarding solutions are the universities using? And I guess Syra and or Sharon, do you want to tag team that one?
Sorry, I was typing in the chat and I completely missed your question.
That's okay. What type of NAC or Wi-Fi onboarding solutions are universities using?
So, you know, at the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank, but we do use one, we do use a particular tool. We used gosh, I'm forgetting it now. We just got rid of it. It was, I cannot remember the name, but once I do, I can send it out. We were using a particular tool, but it was giving us a lot of issues with the Macs specifically, in terms of the certificate mismatch issues and stuff. So we have dropped that one. Sorry, Safe Connect. I think it used to be called Safe Connect. We have dropped Safe Connect and now we are using a different solution, but I am drawing a total blank in my head. But we do use a solution for onboarding devices.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to follow up later on that.
You know, I'd also encourage folks to check out the configuration assistance tool, CAT, which creates automated installers. It basically presents a series of sort of questions about what your institution is using, you know, in terms of you know, what your radius setup is, what your authentication method is, et cetera, and then can provide some customized installers for your users. So if you want to, I think we have some information on that on the website on incommon.org/Eduroam. And again, you can always contact help@incommon.org if you have follow-up questions about that. Okay. All right, well, thanks again to all of our speakers. We appreciate everything you've been doing for your communities and the Eduroam community at large, and especially for coming and presenting on what you have been doing over the last year and change. Dean, do you want to take us out?
I do, yeah. So just a couple of items from InCommon. IAM Online is a monthly webinar series, and the next one in June is about hiring for identity and access management. If you go to the next one, Mike, we also have training sessions on the open source software components that comprise the InCommon Trusted Access platform, and you can see the grouper and midpoint trainings coming up in June, and there's more information at incommon.org. And then we also, next slide, Mike, the InCommon is sponsoring a base camp, which was going to be in person, but is now virtual in July, 4 hours a day for 5 days, the week of July 20th. And that's for people who are new to identity and access management, new to InCommon Federation, or want more information about the Trusted Access platform services and the 4 main software components that comprise that. And there, again, there is more information on the website, either that Internet 2 link or just go to incommon.org. And then finally, I posted in the chat, but we also do an evaluation of these sessions, and it would be valuable if you have a couple of minutes to go in and complete that evaluation. We also are looking for topics for IAM Onlines in the future, so feel free to propose something there in the evaluation. So thank you, Sharon, Jeff, and Syra for your presentations today. And thanks, Mike, for your able job as moderator. And that's it for today. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.